Jillian Michaels was right to call out the body positivity movement. Almost. Love yourself at any size. It sounds good on a bumper sticker, but it's dangerous to ignore what your habits are costing you, and especially your health.
I'm curious about what your definition of body positivity is.
I'm Holly Bertone. I've recovered from over 40 years of emotional eating and a history of weight struggles, and I've helped hundreds of women do the same with a brain and psychology-based approach that I learned when I was the chief of staff for FBI counterintelligence. And what I noticed about this debate, it missed something big on both sides. In this episode, I'm going to break down what Jillian got right, what the body positivity movement gets wrong, and the piece that no one's talking about. After all of the body positivity celebrities got on Ozempic and lost weight, I haven't seen anything about the movement until recently when Jillian Michaels was in this debate. It was called Surrounded, and it was her and it was 20 of these body positivity influencers and activists. And for me, with everything that I went through, and especially because I am an emotional eating coach, I have some pretty strong opinions on the body positivity movement and this debate. I can guarantee whatever it is you're thinking that I'm going to say, or I'm going to agree or disagree on a certain side, well, you might be in for a surprise, because I actually prefer critical thinking. I don't formulate an opinion based on a certain side of an argument. And before I share my thoughts, I do want to give you just some quick context of my background, of the lens of how I'm viewing this, because I think that's an important frame. The very first time I was bullied for my weight was in first grade and on the playground. And we played tag. And because I was slow and because I was a little chunky, I wasn't fast enough to catch anyone. So tag you're it, I was always it. And the boys gave me the nickname It. And it lasted from first grade on that playground all the way through 12th grade graduation. Now, I don't know if that's when the emotional eating began, but I can't remember a time when I didn't eat my feelings. I used food for comfort. I used food to reward myself. I used food as the consolation prize. I used food for pretty much everything. And then when I ate, I couldn't stop. Now, I am 5'1", so petite. There were years that I was at my ideal healthy weight of 110 pounds. And then at my max, I was 35 pounds overweight. But regardless of the weight, regardless of what the scale said, and honestly, up until just a few years ago, I was a hardcore emotional eater. Well, that's enough context to get us started. I am going to share more of my experience as we get into this, but let's go back to the debate. The first thing that I noticed was the body positivity activists, they didn't agree on the core definition of what their movement stood for. So I wasn't sure if they were supposed to be there to represent the movement as a whole, or they're just there to share their own story and experience. If they're debating the movement, that's one thing, but if they're just sharing their story, I mean, that's a whole different conversation. And that got answered with the second thing that I noticed. Jillian showed up and she was completely prepared. She had facts, she had statistics, she had data. Compared to the majority of the women across from her, they debated from their feelings. They debated from their own story loop. And they used the common behavior pattern of justifying why they can't and won't change. And if you watch this debate and you thought, well, this feels more like a therapy session than an actual debate, you actually caught something that most people miss. And you might have wondered the same thing that I did. Is this an actual debate, or is this just a session to justify wanting to stay overweight? Here's what I believe. If this was supposed to be a true debate, do your homework, come with the facts, have your ducks in a row, and present a legitimate argument. Don't just defend your feelings. One of the arguments that Jillian brought up was how being overweight or obese increases your chances of developing a chronic disease, diabetes, cancer, heart issues, which has hundreds of science-backed studies.
My first surrounded claim is that obesity is not healthy, and pretending it is puts lives at risk.
And instead of acknowledging the facts and having a conversation about the facts, the women kept talking about their feelings and justifying why they are the way they are.
What I want to say here is I live with autoimmune disorders, I live with chronic illness, and I'm also neurodivergent. The body positivity movement has made it so that I can tolerate this life. I can find ways to thrive, even still, but I'm not pretending. I grew up with a number of undiagnosed conditions. I grew up with a single parent, undocumented single parent. I don't think that food makes very much sense to me in my neurodivergent brain.
The pattern that they repeated with their responses was just like a defiant child, meaning they weren't actually debating. They were knee deep in protecting their story. They were protecting their identity. And when you get identity involved, logic doesn't even stand a chance. As a professional in the weight loss space, I noticed a big red flag especially with one of the debaters. And she was an eating disorder therapist. And it's important to hold a light to what these people are doing. She deflected Jillian's answers. She talked about how the clinical term obese is actually a slur and should be replaced with fat-bodied.
The idea that fat-bodied people are inherently unhealthy is, I believe, incorrect. No, I'm not wrong.
There's a robust amount of data.
I'm not wrong.
Okay.
Now, when you are a professional and you are working in this space, avoiding clinical reality does not make the consequences go away. So, being naturally curious, I looked into her work, and what I found was concerning. Her Instagram feed, it's not about her as a practitioner. She's actually an influencer. She's got these videos and she's trying different Oreo cookies and different cakes, and she's saying what she thinks of the taste, and she's talking about how she was obsessing about trying them. And let me repeat, she is an eating disorder therapist. This is not about a difference of professional opinion. This is me telling you, when you see people like this come across your feed, I want you to pause and ask, are they helping me to think differently about my situation? Or do they want me to stay stuck in the very patterns that are hurting me? What you eat has consequences. And it's important to talk about what got us here in the first place, rather than just giving people permission to eat whatever they want. And then, oh, if you gain weight, it's not your problem. And it is a huge red flag. It is dangerous when any level of accountability is just labeled as fat phobic. This completely shuts down the conversations that can actually change someone's life. This is where the argument breaks down. By the way, if you're getting any value out of this video, hit that thumbs up and subscribe button. Now, here is my bone to pick with the counter argument. And yes, all of the statistics point to the fact that if you are overweight or obese, your chances of getting a chronic disease are greater, as is all-cause mortality. But it is more important to look at metabolic health and not just a number on this scale. Exhibit A. I was diagnosed with breast cancer on my 39th birthday, and then Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease, 1 year later. And at the time, I weighed 110 pounds. I was a competitive mountain bike racer, and I was an Xterra triathlete. I was in peak athletic shape, but my metabolic health was trash. And the other thing I want to add to the conversation, the overweight women who I work with, they don't want to lose weight to run around in a bikini. What they tell me is they feel out of control around food. They tell me that they're gaining more and more weight every year. And they've either had a major health scare and they want to get it under control with losing weight, or they know it's just a matter of time and they want to eat better and lose weight so they don't end up with a major health scare. And when they share this with me, their conviction and fear is noticeable. And that is why I love helping my clients conquer this, because I want them to live vibrant and happy and healthy lives. And that all being said, I genuinely feel bad for the women in this show who have been, and I'm just going to say it, they've been duped by the body positivity movement. They have been conditioned to just completely ignore the facts and the consequences of their weight on their health. And because I actually did want to understand the different sides of the debate, I found a video, and she was a former body positivity influencer, and her name is Gabriella Lascano. And what she said might surprise you. She said that she loved being active and traveling, but the heavier she got, the more that she couldn't do. And she's my height. She's like 5 feet tall. At her heaviest, though, she was close to 400 pounds. And she immersed herself in the body positivity movement because it was a group of people who understood her and who accepted her. And she said the breaking moment was when she finally realized she was being brainwashed to love herself at any size because it had become an excuse. She said the movement was becoming more and more radical, her words. So even though she wanted to pull back, she actually stayed quiet because she was afraid of the backlash. But then a friend and a mentor of hers who was in the body positivity space as well, by the name of Jamie Lopez, she died at the age of 37 from heart complications. And this opened Gabriella's eyes. She said it was one thing to sacrifice my adventurous lifestyle. It's another thing to sacrifice my health. She changed her platform. She started sharing that it is not fat phobic to actually care about your health. And when she did that, the body positivity community, who once fully supported and embraced her, they turned completely against her. Her videos were filled with all of these hateful comments. She was branded a pariah. She left the movement. And ever since, and good for her, she has been focusing on her own health. In her experience, love yourself at any size only meant something when you're obese and you agree with everything the movement stands for. And if you start talking about loving yourself and wanting to eat better or get healthy, you're shunned. Your voice is now considered hateful instead of helpful. The next point from the debate was there was a lot of talk about shame and how the women are treated. And I'm going to spend a minute here because your girl has a few words to say. First, let me be perfectly clear, crystal clear. Lock in, listen to every word I'm about to say. It is never, ever okay to shame someone, to bully someone for how much they weigh or how they look. Hard stop. I can't speak for any of the women on the show, obviously. Most of them look to be, I would say, between 100 and 300 pounds overweight. I can only speak to what I felt when I was at my heaviest. And again, this was anywhere from 20 to 35 pounds overweight. 5'1", you have the context. What I am referring to is a little bit overweight, not a lot overweight in comparison. That being said, I hated myself. I avoided looking in the mirror. I was ashamed. I hated how my stomach looked. And I felt like a fat slob. My thighs rubbed together so much it made holes in my pants. I covered up in big clothing. When I was married, I wore an oversized t-shirt during, fun time because the shame was just unbearable. I knew that I let myself go. And I just wanted to marinate in being miserable. And I kept eating the junk food, and I kept eating the feelings, and I hated who I became, and eating junk food was more comfortable than making a change. Because guess what? That change is freaking hard to do. But here's the worst part. When I was at my lowest and largest, there was not one thing that anyone could have said to me that was more cruel than what I was already saying to myself. I had a PhD in self-loathing. And how am I supposed to accept love from anyone else when I couldn't even accept it from myself? Okay, let's go back to Gabrielle. She said something. She said something that I don't think anyone would ever talk about unless you've actually been there. She said that when she was close to 400 pounds, she had trouble wiping, as in after going to the bathroom. I can't even imagine what that does to a woman's dignity. And here's where my heart and my empathy and Spicy Holly, the tough love coach, all collide. Because having been through my own experience at just a fraction of the weight gain, and again, I can't speak for these women, but I have a hard time believing they are truly happy in their bodies. Their platform is defensive. And if someone doesn't agree with them, if someone wants to have an honest conversation with them about weight or health, or if someone who is overweight actually wants to lose weight for their health, they're just automatically shunned. They're automatically called fat phobic. You've got one side of the argument saying love yourself at any size. You've got the other side saying lose weight to be healthy. But I want you to listen closely to what I'm about to say. Neither side is going to work if you don't fix the pattern that is driving the behavior. And the bottom line of the pattern that I see in this entire movement, they are demanding external validation because they don't have that internal acceptance. It is easier to blame something beyond themselves and then demand society to change for them rather than looking within and changing themselves. And when that is their platform, it's going to keep them in perpetual victim mode. And here's what is dangerous, because their platform, it's not just holding them back. It demonizes anyone who wants to take responsibility. My journey to get through my own weight and binge eating struggles, it was brutal to look at myself in the mirror, to take radical responsibility for my actions, to realize that I don't love myself. But I did take those steps. I had those hard conversations with myself. I accepted my reality and I took responsibility and I said no more. I am not going to treat myself this way anymore. Breaking those chains was one of the hardest and honestly most freeing things that I've ever done. Practicing radical forgiveness for how I treated myself was one of the scariest things I've ever done. I couldn't even comprehend what forgiveness was. But the freedom, the peace, the calm that I have in my life now because I decided to take those scary steps, because I decided to show up for myself, that level of conviction, I am never going back to the old place. The body positivity movement got one thing right and one thing completely wrong. Yes, you should love yourself and love yourself at any size. But loving yourself doesn't mean lying to yourself. And because you're still listening to me, I know you are the woman who is aware, who takes responsibility for her health. I know you are willing to change. I know you get it. I know you understand the big picture. And you might be wondering what this means for you. Because you are the woman who does take responsibility, who wants to make a change, but you've also probably been frustrated with the lack of progress in the past. If you struggle with emotional eating, until you address the underlying root cause, it is going to impact your results. When your identity is wrapped around your weight or a number on the scale, any threat to that identity, it's going to feel like a threat. And your nervous system is going to do what it does best. It is going to protect you by going right for the comfort food. Emotional eating is a pattern protection problem. And the same patterns that keep you stuck with food are the same patterns defending where you are. But the second you stop protecting this pattern is when you start to create this conviction to change. And that, my friend, achieving that level of conviction is exactly what I help my students do inside of the Break Emotional Eating Accelerator. And if that's something that's interesting to you, I'll leave a link in the show notes. I do want to tell you, this was an extremely hard episode to record because I do have very strong feelings. If I can get past all of this, I'm just an average, ordinary girl, just like you. If I can do this, I know you can too. So thanks for tuning in. I'm Holly Bertone, and this is Weight Loss Forensics.